Hello, all. Welcome to the Transforming Lives panel podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sharmin, and we have Mitzi here with me and a special guest. But before we start, I'd like to invite you to join us to take a few deep breaths. If it's safe where you are and you can close your eyes, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And let's repeat that a few times. And as you continue to take deep breaths, focus on your breath so that you can be present with us. You can be grounded, let go of all the things that did not happen today, the things that you plan to do right now or after the next 30 minutes. Just take deep breaths in and out as you let go of the day and let go of the things that you are planning to do and just be present with that breath. And when you're comfortable, just rejoin us in the room. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And we would like to welcome Dr. Saloni Surah. And she is a published author of her first children's book, Flora Investigates the Case of the Missing Gold Eggs. This is a funny early chapter book for 6 to 9-year-olds that helps kids think big and combat gender stereotypes. She's also an HIV and sexual health consultant and has a PhD in HIV infection and drug use. She has worked with marginalized populations from all over the world. Working in her particular area of medicine, Dr. Surah became acutely aware of the mind-body connection with regards to ill health and well-being. She has an active interest in meditation, self-development, and other healing modalities, and also work as a spiritual coach using EFT and energy work. Join me in welcoming Dr. Surah.
Thank you for having me. And I really enjoyed the breath work at the beginning. I needed it. So did
I. Okay. So, Dr. Surah, as I read your bio, and Flora Investigates the Case of the Missing Gold Eggs. I want to start there. How did that narrative, what innovation, creativity, brilliance led to that narrative encouraging children to combat gender stereotypes?
So, I've been writing for a long time. I started writing about 13 years ago when, funnily enough, I was doing my PhD, which you'd think would be crazy because you'd be busy. But it was the first time I was able to manage my time. And this is my fourth book, but my first published. You write about kind of what you know about. And you kind of go back and go, oh gosh, that's how that's playing out. So this one, I'm going to show you a picture because I just have it here. And I love the way you said it. You just made me smile. It's a funny book. It's actually loosely based on my mother-in-law and my in-laws, my husband's friends and family. My husband's Italian, and my mother-in-law used to keep chickens. And one day, one of them went missing, and he joked that there'd been a murder in the back garden to his brother. And his brother was like, and then I went to Florence, where he's from, and where the book's set, and met the friends and the families and the neighbours and cats and dogs, and the story brewed. But, I have children, and I wanted a healthy female role model for both of my children, not just for my daughter, because, women are often portrayed as either incredibly made up or incredibly on the go. And I just, she's bookish, she's normal, she's a bit shy, she likes solving puzzles. And she also, has a dream, which is to be a big detective. She sets up her own agency because, who wants to employ a girl detective? And she solves this case. She flies on a boat and has a lot of fun in the meantime, but also faces her fears. So that was what I wanted to do in my books. I've looked after so much poverty, illiteracy, and I've really seen how that manifests in ill health, or how those cycles repeat in families, even just in my medical career. And, having looked after so many individuals who couldn't read or write and weren't read to or weren't encouraged, that's what I want to do with my children's book, but also, tackle sometimes tricky topics too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love how you wove in your, as you say, your family's experience and the setting and everything into the story, which I'm sure makes it all the better for that personal touch that's involved in it. So why didn't you publish the other three? Because you said it's your fourth.
Oh, well, life got in the way, and I did the whole thing. I pitched, I got feedback, I went to courses, conferences, but then I became unwell. So I had a very bad workplace bullying situation and stalking, and I ended up with PTSD and then birth trauma. And that has been, for me, it's been a 9-year period of my life, but it's been bad for a good 5-6 years. And obviously that meant I really wasn't in a position to pitch to agents and everything. So I actually self-published this one, which had never been my intention, but it's just where my life was. I wanted to get some power back and move forward. I didn't want to wait 2 years, which is what the norm in the traditional fields, you get a book deal and it's 2 years. So for me, it was partly about moving on and getting some power back in my life. My second book, which is a clipped wing fairy book, and that one is about bullying. It's a forbidden friendship between a fairy and a human girl, which I started writing and didn't realize what I was writing about. That one I had planned again to self-publish at the end of last year, but it doesn't want it. The fairies are very particular. So I am back doing a tiny bit of editing on it and searching for a publisher.
Interesting. And I mean, the area of field that you work in and helping people with HIV and all that, can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of what you do and how you work with people in that?
Of course, yes. So I don't anymore. But I did for a very long time. So I'm a senior doctor in the field of HIV and sexual health. I kind of fell into it quite a long time ago, just ended up doing a job in London at the time in the Royal Free Hospital. And my perception of HIV had been what I'd seen on the news, and I'm sure that it was terrible here. We had these adverts of tombstones and all the stigma associated with it. And when I started working with HIV, I was, a lot younger and I was a junior doctor. It wasn't as I expected, and the individuals I was looking at weren't as I expected, and they were just normal people. Many of whom there was no reason. It was just they were unlucky. I mean, yes, there were people from the traditional groups, but they were just normal people, and that really made me question what I'd been led to believe. I then went into it further. So at that point, I was doing an infectious disease job and did all my training, exams, and decided to specialize in HIV and sexual health. So it's slightly different setup in the UK as to over the pond. But I did all sorts. So I worked as a rape examiner for a while. I've gone into prisons. I've pretty much heard it all, looked after a lot of prisoners, been told a lot of stuff. I've had patients telling me about not doing nice things and people telling me about being sexually abused. So yeah, I've pretty much heard it all. It was a privilege. I was very privileged to look after the patients that I did, many of whom had very tricky lives, many of whom, had lived from all over. And for me, it was a wonderful thing, challenging at times, but, wonderful as well.
Your bio mentioned that mind and body connection. And I found that intriguing because of your being an author. And so what led to the mind and body connection?
Okay, so it's pretty hard to avoid. If you work certainly in the sexual health field, you really see the psychosomatic in play quite a lot. We would often have individuals, men coming in with, what they thought was discharge or convinced they had something. You'd see it in pelvic pain and sometimes with erectile issues. Often it was psychological. You may be somebody, young patient, young men, suddenly were complaining that they have difficulties with maintaining or getting an erection. And, usually when you dug, it was due to relationship issues or they liked the partner for the first time. So it's something, if you work in this particular field of medicine, you see quite a lot. I also have a PhD in HIV and drug use. And, those individuals that I was looking after, many of them had no chance of changing their lives. They had grown up with parents that had been involved in drug use. They lived in incredibly poor areas of the city. Many had grown up walking on carpets of needles. And, the chance of them being able to break out of that was nigh on impossible. So you'd see entire families affected and wiped out by this. With how are they going to break out of it? They're in the same financial situation, the same area, the level of education is such, and they don't have the support. So it was really, for me, eye-opening, but really clear as to how that manifested. And I've seen it myself. If I've been unwell, when I've been unwell, often it has been a mind-body thing, and we see it in children quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
So how did you manage your own mental health while working with people like this? Because I know for myself, I've always been somebody who's tried to help others when they're in tough situations. But one of the things that's been really challenging is I get really involved. Like I had been made aware of somebody who I had been told had been living on the street because the mother had died and the father had thrown him out. And I took him in. It turned out that wasn't the story. He was actually on drugs. And so my husband's like, don't, it's bad enough you bring home stray cats. Now you're bringing home stray people. But that it's my nature to want to help. And that's part of the challenge is sort of that getting caught in it. Like, so how do you keep your sanity and help them without sort of getting caught into it and trapped in it, if you know what I mean?
It's a really good question, and it's challenging. I think it's tough. It depends on the individual. Me, I found it challenging. When you're a junior doctor, it's often just do or die. You've got so many patients. It's continuous. As you get older and more experienced, I think you feel it more, and certainly I did. When I went back as a consultant, I went back part-time, and that was part of the reason is that I knew that I needed that time to me, and I was writing and coaching at that point too, and I think that balanced it out for me. It made me a better doctor because I had that time for me. It was still challenging, and working in those environments are draining. If you've ever been to a prison, it's an incredibly challenging place to be, and when you're dealing with that day in, day out, it can be tough. And I think that's just the reality of it. You're right. It if you're sensitive, if you're empathic, if you want to help others, you can lose yourself in that. And I certainly have at times. I mean, obviously in my role, social workers and that took on a lot of the ancillary stuff. So people had defined roles, but it was definitely a big factor in the reason as to why I went part-time. At that point I was single and wanted to meet somebody and have a family, which I do now have, and I knew that if I kept on working like that, that wasn't going to happen. But energetically it can be challenging, especially when you're hearing things like that. And I like to help people transform their lives, and often with the sexual health you can do that, and with the HIV you can too. You can see people coming in incredibly unwell, newly diagnosed, and then back a year later pregnant. But there's also a large group of individuals that's not going to happen with, and their lives are playing out and their brain conditioning such and their thought process is such that it's a revolving door, and you just see them in crisis, which is it's tough.
Thank you, Dr. Surah. And
thank you so much for joining us today on Transforming Lives panel podcast. We hope that you receive some nuggets of wisdom and seeds to plant along your journey of transformation. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we encourage you to let us know and to share us with those that matter in your life. If you would like to connect with anyone from the panel or our guest speaker, you can find all of the ways to connect in our show notes. We have so much gratitude for you, and we are so thankful to be a part of your day. Until next time, take great care.